Hello again, everyone. We're back again with another episode of The Fact, the series that discusses international political issues every week. Today, we would like to talk about the recent attacks by Israel forces and Israeli military forces to different Arab countries, including Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq, which happened in this recent week. And we have three respected guests tonight, and we would like to discuss this subject with these distinguished guests. We have Miss Randi Nord from USA. She's founder of Geopolitical Alert, and also she's a political analyst. And also we have Mr. James Carey. He's also an editor in Geopolitical Alert and also a political analyst. And also we have Mr. Riaz Kerim from England. He is a political analyst and commentator. Thank you everyone for joining us in this episode. I would like to start with the first question, starting with Ms. Nord. If we go back in this recent week, we have seen that actually Israel tried to attack Hashd Al-Shabi forces in Iraq. I would like to know about the basic purpose or goal behind that, because I guess it is somehow the first time that Israel tries to somehow directly involve itself in some kind of attack in Iraq. So what is the goal behind that?
You're right. This is very unusual. We haven't seen anything like this in a very long time. I think first it's important to look at what's happening inside the Israeli government right now. They held elections in April. Netanyahu's party failed to form a government. They have snap elections scheduled for mid-September, which we're coming up on in about 2 weeks. So as this plays out, and as these elections play out, Netanyahu still faces a corruption scandal and criminal investigation. So on one hand, these military attacks on Iraqi resistance forces serve as a great deflection and distraction for Netanyahu to point out as an achievement and justification for his party's power. And we saw the United States release a statement distancing itself from Israel's actions because Washington knows that its presence in Iraq is on borrowed time right now, and I don't think it wants to do anything that could jeopardize its relationship with Baghdad. So that's another thing Netanyahu can point to and say, look, our greatest allies aren't backing us up. Washington won't support us, so we need to take matters into our own hands with rogue military action. And then on the other hand, I think the Israelis really do believe that Washington has failed to remove resistance and Iranian allied elements in Iraq as fast as they would have liked. And they don't see that happening anytime soon. So I think they're really trying to provoke resistance forces in Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq all together and kind of provoke a response so they can escalate this. And as we know now, this attack in Iraq was only the first in a string of Israeli attacks in Syria and now Lebanon, which we're still seeing clashes right now, Israeli attacks into Lebanon and things happening at the border. And they know there's a 50-50 chance they'll have U.S. support should a broader war break out. There's always a chance the U.S. won't want to risk the need to send ground troops on behalf of Israel and get involved quite to that extent. But they know at the very least they won't face consequences for their actions from the international community and their closest allies. So they don't have anything to lose by launching these attacks. But again, I think it will be more important to kind of watch how things play out along the Lebanese border and how things play out after the elections. As horrible the Israelis' actions are and unjustified right now, we could see things calm down in a couple weeks.
Well, here comes the question of the possible responses that Iraq or Iraqi forces should actually give to such an attack from Israel. And I would like to ask Mr. Kerim about this question. Do you think that should be any kind of direct response from, Iraqi forces toward this attack or not?
Well, I think Randi is correct, but I'm going to add a little bit to Randi's reply. I think her analysis is bang on, but when you look at Hashd Al-Shabi, it is led by Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis. Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis was a commander in the Hezbollah. And then he came back and he formed the People's Front. So basically, they were fighting side by side with the Iraqi forces, and it was Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis who actually drove ISIS out of Iraq. And what had happened was the United States had come out and said that you need to disband these people because they were very, very powerful, and they still are. You need to disband this and integrate them into the Iraqi army, to which Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis said no. That's not going to happen, and I think the Iraqi government also said no at that time. Now, they know, Israel knows that Abu Mahdi was a commander in Hezbollah. They also know that Abu Mahdi has very, very close ties with Iran. He is seen several times with the IRGC's General Qasem Soleimani, and has been pictured so many times. They visit each other. And Abu Mahdi is also very powerful in the Iraqi government. So this is going to be a no-no from the Iraq side. But this is one element of Iran, as Bibi Netanyahu puts it. This is one element of Iran, and the other element is Hezbollah. And since Abu Mahdi is very far out, to physically attack Israel, I think Hezbollah is the one that is going to do his work for him. I completely agree with Randi and her analysis on this, but this is quite an issue right now that is happening, and it has to die down because, like Randi said, the United States has distanced itself from this, and they need this to calm down. And I think in as far as Iraq is concerned, they have voiced their concern and said very clearly that this was a violation of our sovereignty. And I think they've even taken it to the United Nations that these guys did come inside our country and attack us without any provocation. But I think the United States is playing peacemaker at this point and not wanting any of this because they are overstretched, and as Randi said, the last thing they want is out of Iraq, and that is going to be that is going to be the icing on the cake for Donald Trump to be kicked out of there. With his election looming, and also Bibi Netanyahu's election is looming. What Bibi Netanyahu did was he has promised the Israeli people that he's the only one that can keep them safe, kind of like what George Bush did. And so he went rogue and basically attacked Syria. He attacked Iraq, and then he attacked Hezbollah as well. The problem is that it backfired on him. And even he came out and said that, okay, that was it. when as far as we're concerned, this was it. And he has made a point to put a gag order on his cabinet that nobody is going to say anything about these attacks from Hezbollah. That was his statement today. And so, he's basically put himself in a situation where, you can, if you do anything, you're just going to be able to shove your foot in your mouth even more. And it's time to take it out. I guess that's how I would put it.
Well, you pointed out about these different, attacks that Israel had toward different countries around itself. And somehow you said that actually Netanyahu somehow went rogue because of such attacks. So I would like to know about the initial reason behind such a move toward all these countries. I mean, suddenly one entity tries to attack different countries at the same time somehow and involve itself in a different different fronts. And I don't know which exact goal it tries to achieve by each one of these countries, but I would like to ask James about Syria. We have talked about Iraq. We will actually talk about Lebanon, but I would like to go into Syria. What is the reason behind its attack towards Syria?
Motives behind this. Syria, similar to what Randy said about Iraq, Israel is obviously facing pressure on their border from Syria. Like Lebanon, it's much closer too. They see, in the time of the election, the Likud party of Netanyahu is obviously running against even farther right figures, primarily military figures, and basically open fascists in that country who would love to start an open war with Iran. So Bibi hitting targets within Syria or Iraq that he claims to be Iranian proxies benefits him in this election. I also think with Syria, there's a bit of frustration in Israel with how the post-war situation is coming out. I don't think Israel is appreciative of the Iranian influence, obviously, but the Russian influence. Turkey growing closer to Russia and Iran has seemed to prove a real problem for Israeli interests, and Erdogan, although he does still work with Israel, has given them some trouble in the past and will likely continue to in the future, like he's doing to the U.S. So I think in Syria, the way things have shifted after the war have caused a real problem for Israel, and they don't like I said, the Iranians being in the country, or even Hezbollah or anything like that being in the country. And they're not happy to see Bashar Assad on top, obviously. They did not want this to happen. They were well invested in regime change with countries like Turkey and Saudi Arabia and things like that. We all know that Israel funded the rebels in the Golan Heights and places like that around their border. And obviously farther out, Daesh has been caught with Israeli weapons, and this was all part of their project. And I think seeing that project fail, they're continuing to try and drive wedges between the forces that remain inside of Syria.
All right, thank you, James. Well, if we get back to Syria again, we already know that some of these attacks are toward some of Iranian-backed forces, or somehow those bases that Iranians are actually trying to focus on in Syria. And we don't know exactly what kind of reaction Iran should have toward such attacks. And some people say that actually Iran should actually avoid any kind of direct collision or conflict between itself and Israel based on those attacks. But some people say that actually it is necessary that Iran defends itself in such spaces, and or at least defend those forces that are backed with this country. So, what is your opinion, Randy, about such reactions that Iranian forces or Iran basically should have?
Well, like you said, Iran is Iran is in a difficult spot because we have the Israelis attacking Iranian targets all across the region, and the Iranians have to know that the Israelis are carrying out these attacks to elicit some kind of military response. And at the same time, Iran needs to let it be known that they won't put up with attacks on their people and their allies. But this also comes at a unique time because you had Zarif and with the G7 summit trying to repair relations with the members of the JCPOA that the United States backed out of, I believe 2 years ago now. So Iran, if I haven't seen much of a response on the ground yet, and if that's the case, it seems like they're taking a shrewd move to kind of step back and look at their options and decide how to respond militarily should they decide to do that. If that's the case, it seems like their best course of action would just be to continue strengthening their allies on the ground through training and weaponry while repairing relations and maintaining relations and trade with entities in Europe and China and Russia to kind of continue with what's happening with the U.S. is kind of isolating itself here by pulling out of the trade agreement and kind of standing off against Europe in favor of a closer relationship with Israel and Saudi Arabia. So I think that if Iran could continue its restraint while defending itself as necessary, it could kind of strengthen these relationships in the background and develop more support should the Israelis continue provoking Iranian allies in the region, and it would be able to have the support should it need to defend itself militarily. But I'm not sure that Israel will take it that far yet, as disgusting as these attacks are now. So I think what Iran's doing is pretty smart, kind of playing it low key and calculating what to do next.
Thank you, Randy. It comes the recent event. It is actually an ongoing event, as you know, that a few days ago Israel attacked Lebanon lands, and today again, which is Sunday, they attacked some different spots in south of Lebanon. And although we witnessed the response from the direct response from Lebanon towards some of the convoys, military convoys in Israel, but if we go and focus on this issue, Mr. Kerim, what is the basic or final goal about Lebanon itself? Do you think all these attacks are basically somehow planned to finally focus them on Lebanon? Is the Lebanon the final target among all of these attacks, or it's just a part of a plan or part of the whole war that Israel tries to seek?
Well, there's so many answers to that question. Let's look at the first one. The first one is that Israel's ultimate dream is to have Greater Israel or Eretz Israel, which includes Syria and Lebanon, part of Lebanon as well, and to have the Levant Basin or a part of the Levant Basin where they can get some oil, because remember, Israel does not have any oil. They only have natural gas. And, that getting oil is very important to them. That is why they're grabbing as much land as they possibly can from Syria, because Syria is a very oil-rich country. That is the number one thing. Number two is that Benjamin Netanyahu, like I said, he wanted to show his clout because he's made promises for his election that he's the only person who can keep them safe, and so he wanted to show his clout and go out and bomb all Iranian proxies, so to speak. And he did not actually expect a retaliatory statement right away. But having known Hezbollah and fought them in a war, which was a losing proposition for Israel, they they took the chance, and basically Hezbollah came back and slapped them right back. And that doesn't bode very well for Benjamin Netanyahu right now. He is going to try and brush this under the carpet because if he takes this any further, Hezbollah are ready to fight Israel at a moment's notice, and he knows that. And as far as Iran is concerned, I think Iran is, like Randy said, Iran is playing it very smart. They're playing very diplomatically. They don't want to conflagrate anything that that can bring harm to the region right now, and so they are using more diplomacy than anything else. However, push comes to shove, if this, because what Israel is doing right now is provoking Iran, but in an indirect way. Because they cannot go and directly provoke Iran, so they are doing it indirectly, and Iran is responding very well vis-a-vis Hezbollah. They came right back and basically just blew off their tank and sent bombs right inside of Israel. Israel knows that having to start a full-fledged war with Hezbollah could be very, very, number one, costly. But number two, he also knows that if there is, there's an election looming, and if he does something like that and manufactures a war, he can stay on power for a while. So I don't know what Benjamin Netanyahu is thinking right now, but in both cases, he would lose for sure, because America doesn't want any part of it right now because they are overstretched. And, America rather fight on Twitter than actually on the ground.
In here, I would like to ask the last question, which is somehow related to the previous question. But as you know, Israel is somehow or was waiting for the response from Lebanon, because, as you know, Said Hassan Nasrallah, he actually promised that he will respond to such attacks to Lebanon, and he will somehow take a revenge of those, responses of those attacks. But I would like to know if Netanyahu, or basically the government in Israel, is somehow afraid from such attacks or from such responses, because, as you know, in Israel right now, Israeli people are somehow against Netanyahu's policies, because he's making lots of wars, and people are against him because of such, decisions that he had made based on making wars. And maybe people are basically afraid of such, policies or such responses from Lebanon or from Hezbollah. But I would like to know about the core of government and Netanyahu's government. Are they afraid or not? James, would you please tell us about this point?
I think it's pretty apparent they're afraid. I think it's very obvious they're afraid. Ever since the 1980s, they've been afraid. They tried, and 2006, both times have proved wrong for them. The first time Israel went into Lebanon was after the Merkava tanks were developed, and as soon as they crossed the border, they were destroyed. I mean, ever since the 1980s, every time they've messed with Lebanon, gone into Lebanon, it's turned out to be destruction. A lot of these lawmakers are of the age that they were part of that at this point. And, obviously everyone serves in the military in Israel, and I think they realize the type of destruction that Hezbollah has brought on them in the past. Add that into the last couple of years of Hezbollah operating in Syria, rearming themselves with new weapons, battlefield experience. on top of the decades of experience they have operating right under Israel's nose. Add that all together and they make an even more dangerous combination than they did in 2006. Israel's deathly afraid of that. And in a country with, enforced conscription for everyone, you're going to have a problem when you start sending people in, especially now when it could turn into a wider war with Syria and Iraq. There's forces in all of these countries that could end up becoming a problem should Hezbollah end up in conflict with Israel. They could unleash a mass wave of anti-Israeli terror across the region if they decided to do this, and they know that. I think the United States is afraid of the same thing. They know how far, and especially Hezbollah backed into a corner. They know how far they can reach, and they know how far they will go. And I think the U.S. and Israeli lawmakers are both in fear of that. I think that's why they don't attack Iran directly, because they know something like this could happen.
All right. Actually, I asked all my questions, but in here, because this subject is somehow important and also very vast, I would like to hear your words about the other aspects of such a subject. So, starting with Randi, would you like to add anything or add something that we hadn't covered so far?
One thing I'd like to add, I think it was I don't think Israel expected the Lebanese government to kind of unite behind Hezbollah and resistance forces after they launched the attacks. After the first two drones were spotted over the suburbs, you even had Hariri come out and condemn this attack on sovereignty and essentially throw his support behind any actions that needed to be taken should the Israelis continue breaching Lebanese air or ground space, which is unusual. So that's one good thing. On the other hand, we also have the Security Council and the UN Human Rights Council coming up in addition to the Israeli elections, all around the same time. So I think it will be interesting to watch if anything's brought up in the UN Security Council about these things, the kind of spats at the Human Rights Council, and then what happens with the Israeli elections. So I'm looking forward to those.
All right, thank you. Riaz, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I think we covered everything except Saad Hariri is actually not in a very good position to state otherwise, because he's leading a coalition government, and Hezbollah has the most amount of seats they've ever had in the parliament as well. So they hold some kind of clout over there, and Saad Hariri also knows very well that Hezbollah is capable of taking on Iran any day, any time, like James said. So for Israel, going in a war with Lebanon or with Hezbollah is a losing proposition, whichever way you look at it. They've like James said, they have rearmed themselves. They have sophisticated missiles, and they have come out and also said they've made it very clear that you may have you may have nuclear bombs, but we know where your nuclear reactors are, and one missile will take you out. So don't think that you can scare us with your nuclear bombs. They went out as far as saying that. So I think Israel needs to take this very seriously. Saad Hariri's his friendship with Mohammed bin Salman is somewhat tainted now since what happened the last time. So I think he has no choice but to support Hezbollah, and the information that we're getting from inside of Lebanon is that people are excited that Hezbollah came out and went after Israel, and they're very happy, and like Randi said, they've gathered behind Hezbollah for this one. So that is very unusual, but it is very, very good because I'm sure Israel is taking notice of that, and Israel needs to stop being the bully in the Middle East and just mind its own business. It's as simple as that.
Okay, thank you. And James, would you like to add something to this subject?
I'd just like to say, I think that Israel is probably honestly banking on the United States not wanting a wider war. Currently here, there is no voting bloc or anything, and we are in a presidential election. There's no voting bloc who wants a wider Middle Eastern war with troops deployed again to places like Iraq or Syria. And I think Israel is trying to bank on that, knowing that they can continue making these strikes, and they're hoping Iran doesn't react. And obviously Iran doesn't want a wider war either, much like most of the people here in the United States. So right now, I do think Israel is trying to manipulate this for political gain at home. They know they likely won't get their wider war with Iran, but this gives them a chance to sort of puff out their chest and look strong again, especially Netanyahu, who, as we've all discussed here, is under threat at home from both corruption investigations and basically people who quit his party because it wasn't right-wing enough. So I think you're going to see them continue to try to do things like this, although they are afraid of a wider conflict with Hezbollah or something like that. I think Israel is banking on that not coming because I think they know the U.S. isn't going to get involved. I don't think they'll push it far enough that a wider conflict could break out, because I think they realize that Donald Trump, especially in election year, is in no position to start an actual war with Iran. And like I stated before, Hezbollah and sort of the tentacles of the resistance that could reach out should something like this happen would be far too dangerous for the United States to try and deal with during an election year like this. So I think Israel is probably banking on us not stepping in, but we'll have to see how far they try to actually push things.
Okay, thank you everyone. We have come actually to the end of our episode. I would like to thank all three of you for accepting our invitation, and also for your fruitful and informative talks and discussion on this subject. I would like to thank Ms. Randi Nord and also Mr. James Carey from USA, and also Mr. Riaz Kerim from England. For our viewers and listeners, you can actually follow the program on our YouTube channel and also on the website and social networks. Thank you everyone, and hope to see you again. Goodbye.